Ariel swallowed hard. I have a medical condition, she said, slightly louder. My mom got permission from the school for my hair. Ms. Rohr's expression hardened. A medical condition that requires fancy braids? That's a new one. She turned to address the class. See how students will say anything to get around the rules? No one laughed. The silence was deafening. You either take those extensions out right now or you'll be sent home, Ms. Rohr declared. Your choice. Ariel's eyes welled with tears. Please, I can't. My mom? Your mother isn't here, Ms. Rohr cut in, and I doubt she'd approve of you lying to a teacher. She grabbed Ariel by the arm. Let's go. We'll sort this out in the nurse's office. As Ms. Rohr pulled Ariel toward the door, Maya quickly slipped her phone from her pocket and pressed record, capturing the teacher's tight grip on Ariel's arm and the fear on her friend's face. The hallway stretched endlessly as Miss Rohr marched Ariel toward the nurse's office, her fingers digging into the girl's upper arm. Students in other classrooms glanced up as they passed, curious eyes following the unfolding scene. Miss Adams, Ms. Rohr called as they entered the nurse's office. This student is in violation of the dress code. She claims she has some sort of medical condition, but I have my doubts. Nurse Adams looked up from her computer, her brow furrowing as she took in Ariel's tear-streaked face. What seems to be the problem? Her hair, Ms. Rohr stated flatly. It's against regulations. I have alopecia, Ariel managed to say. My mom filed paperwork. Please check. Nurse Adams moved to her filing cabinet. Let me see. Don't bother, Ms. Rohr interrupted. I already checked her file this morning. There's a general medical form, but nothing specific about hair exemptions. This was a lie, but Ariel was too overwhelmed to challenge it. But my mom... Talk to Principal Wexley, Ariel insisted. Please call her. Your mother's deployed overseas, isn't she? Ms. Rohr's tone was suddenly sympathetic, though her eyes remained cold. Look, I understand this is difficult, but rules are rules. We need to remove these extensions for cleanliness and equality. Nurse Adams hesitated. Shouldn't we call her father first? I have parental permission on file. Ms. Rohr lied again, her voice confident. This is a school policy matter. We're authorized to enforce the dress code. Still uncertain, Nurse Adams glanced between Ms. Rohr and Ariel. I suppose if there's permission... There is, Ms. Rohr assured her. Now do you have clippers? These extensions need to come out. Ariel's blood ran cold. No, please, she begged. My hair. You don't understand. But Ms. Rohr was already guiding her into the exam chair. Nurse Adams reluctantly brought out a set of clippers from a cabinet, still looking unsure. This is for your own good, Ariel, Ms. Rohr said, switching on the clippers. The mechanical buzz filled the small office. Everyone follows the same rules here. With a swift motion, Ms. Rohr began removing Ariel's braided extensions, revealing the patchy, sparse hair beneath. Tears streamed down Ariel's face as she watched pieces of her carefully crafted camouflage fall to the floor. See? That wasn't so bad, Ms. Rohr said, her voice falsely cheerful, but she didn't stop. With the extensions gone, the clippers continued to move across Ariel's scalp, taking what little natural hair remained. That's enough. Nurse Adams finally intervened, but the damage was done. Ariel sat in the chair, nearly bald, looking like a stranger to herself in the small mirror on the wall. There, Ms. Rohr said, switching off the clippers. Now you're in compliance. Ariel couldn't speak. Her body shook with silent sobs as her hands reached up to feel her exposed scalp. The cold air of the nurse's office stung against her skin. Ariel swallowed hard. I have a medical condition, she said, slightly louder. My mom got permission from the school for my hair. Ms. Rohr's expression hardened. A medical condition that requires fancy braids? That's a new one. She turned to address the class. See how students will say anything to get around the rules? No one laughed. The silence was deafening. You either take those extensions out right now or you'll be sent home, Ms. Rohr declared. Your choice. Ariel's eyes welled with tears. Please, I can't. My mom? Your mother isn't here, Ms. Rohr cut in, and I doubt she'd approve of you lying to a teacher. She grabbed Ariel by the arm. Let's go. We'll sort this out in the nurse's office. As Ms. Rohr pulled Ariel toward the door, Maya quickly slipped her phone from her pocket and pressed record, capturing the teacher's tight grip on Ariel's arm and the fear on her friend's face. The hallway stretched endlessly as Miss Rohr marched Ariel toward the nurse's office, her fingers digging into the girl's upper arm. Students in other classrooms glanced up as they passed, curious eyes following the unfolding scene. Miss Adams, Ms. Rohr called as they entered the nurse's office. This student is in violation of the dress code. She claims she has some sort of medical condition, but I have my doubts. Nurse Adams looked up from her computer, her brow furrowing as she took in Ariel's tear-streaked face. What seems to be the problem? Her hair, Ms. Rohr stated flatly. It's against regulations. I have alopecia, Ariel managed to say. My mom filed paperwork. Please check. Nurse Adams moved to her filing cabinet. Let me see. Don't bother, Miss Rohr interrupted. I already checked her file this morning. There's a general medical form, but nothing specific about hair exemptions. This was a lie, but Ariel was too overwhelmed to challenge it. But my mom... Talk to Principal Wexley, Ariel insisted. Please call her. Your mother's deployed overseas, isn't she? Ms. Rohr's tone was suddenly sympathetic, though her eyes remained cold. Look, I understand this is difficult, but rules are rules. We need to remove these extensions for cleanliness and equality. Nurse Adams hesitated. Shouldn't we call her father first? I have parental permission on file. Ms. Rohr lied again, her voice confident. This is a school policy matter. We're authorized to enforce the dress code. Still uncertain, Nurse Adams glanced between Ms. Rohr and Ariel. I suppose if there's permission... There is, Ms. Rohr assured her. Now do you have clippers? These extensions need to come out. Ariel's blood ran cold. No, please, she begged. My hair. You don't understand. But Ms. Rohr was already guiding her into the exam chair. Nurse Adams reluctantly brought out a set of clippers from a cabinet, still looking unsure. This is for your own good, Ariel, Ms. Rohr said, switching on the clippers. The mechanical buzz filled the small office. Everyone follows the same rules here. With a swift motion, Ms. Rohr began removing Ariel's braided extensions, revealing the patchy, sparse hair beneath. Tears streamed down Ariel's face as she watched pieces of her carefully crafted camouflage fall to the floor. See? That wasn't so bad, Ms. Rohr said, her voice falsely cheerful, but she didn't stop. With the extensions gone, the clippers continued to move across Ariel's scalp, taking what little natural hair remained. That's enough. Nurse Adams finally intervened, but the damage was done. Ariel sat in the chair, nearly bald, looking like a stranger to herself in the small mirror on the wall. There, Ms. Rohr said, switching off the clippers. Now you're in compliance. Ariel couldn't speak. Her body shook with silent sobs as her hands reached up to feel her exposed scalp. The cold air of the nurse's office stung against her skin. I'll give you a few minutes to collect yourself, Ms. Rohr said, placing the clippers back on the counter. Then you can return to class. She exited the office, leaving Ariel alone with Nurse Adams. I'm so sorry, the nurse whispered, clearly distressed. I didn't realize she would. She stopped, unable to find the right words. Let me call your father. But Ariel couldn't respond. She curled into herself, her entire world shattered. I want my mom, she finally whispered. I'll call your dad right away, Nurse Adams promised, reaching for the phone. Just wait here. She stepped out of the office, leaving Ariel alone with her reflection. Minutes later, the door cracked open. Maya peeked in, her eyes widening at the sight of her friend. Without a word, she rushed to Ariel's side, pulling off her hoodie and gently placing it over Ariel's head. I saw what happened, Maya said, her voice trembling with anger. I recorded some of it. My sister's going to help us. That witch can't get away with this. Ariel said nothing. She pulled the hoodie tight around her face and stared blankly ahead. That evening, as the video began circulating online, the school issued a brief statement. We are aware of a disciplinary misunderstanding that occurred today. The teacher involved has been suspended for 1 day while we investigate the matter. The privacy of all parties will be respected during this process. No mention of the shaving, no mention of Ariel's medical condition, no mention of the humiliation a 12-year-old girl had endured at the hands of someone meant to protect her. Eric Daniels paced the living room floor, his cell phone pressed tightly against his ear. The former Army sergeant had been trying to reach his wife for hours, leaving increasingly urgent messages. Naomi, call me as soon as you get this, he said, his voice strained. It's about Ariel. So, meeting happened at school. It's bad. He ended the call and ran a hand over his face, exhaustion etched in every line. Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Daniels was 3 weeks into a classified operation overseas. Communication was limited at best, and Eric had no way of knowing when she'd receive his messages. Right now, he was on his own. Upstairs, Ariel hadn't spoken a word since he'd picked her up from school. She'd simply handed him the hoodie Maya had given her and walked silently to the car, her exposed scalp a shocking sight that had unleashed a flood of emotions Eric struggled to contain. Anger, confusion, heartbreak, and a burning desire to march back into that school and demand answers. But Ariel needed him more, so he'd driven home, helping her inside when her legs seemed too weak to carry her. Now she sat motionless on her bed, staring at the wall, the hoodie pulled back over her head. Meanwhile, across town, Principal Thomas Wexley had called an emergency meeting in his office. The blinds were drawn, and his secretary had strict instructions not to interrupt. "This is a nightmare," Wexley muttered, loosening his tie. At 58, he'd hoped to coast through his final years before retirement without incident. "What the hell were you thinking, Evelyn?" Ms. Rohr sat stiffly in one of the visitor chairs, her posture defensive. "I was enforcing the dress code as instructed. The girl was being defiant." The third person in the room, Harold Brennan, the school district's attorney, cleared his throat. "Let's focus on damage control. The video doesn't show the actual haircut. We can frame this as a miscommunication." "Miscommunication?" Wexley's voice rose. "She shaved a student's head." "Partial video evidence," Brennan countered coolly. "Her word against the students, and we have the new dress code policy to back us up." Ms. Rohr nodded. "The girl claimed to have some medical condition, but there was nothing specific in her file about hair exemptions." "Was there anything about alopecia?" Wexley asked, remembering a conversation from months ago. "Not that I saw," Ms. Rohr answered too quickly. Brennan tapped his pen against his legal pad. "Here's our approach. We acknowledge a disciplinary incident occurred. We say proper procedures weren't followed, hence the one-day suspension, but we don't admit to any specific actions. We cite student privacy laws to avoid details." "And if the parents push?" Wexley asked. "We suggest private mediation," Brennan replied. "Keep it out of the courts. Offer counseling for the student. Maybe a transfer to another classroom." Wexley nodded slowly. "Fine. Draft the statement. I want this contained by tomorrow morning." As the adults plotted, Ariel sat in her darkening bedroom. Her sketchpad lay open beside her, but the pencil remained untouched. The characters she'd created, brave, colorful heroes who overcame obstacles, seemed childish now, meaningless. She ran her hand over her scalp again, feeling the uneven patches where Ms. Rohr had been particularly rough with the clippers. The physical sensation was strange, but it was nothing compared to the hollowness inside her. In her mind, she kept replaying the moment when the first braid fell to the floor, the sudden exposure, the laughter in Ms. Rohr's eyes, the helplessness. Eric knocked gently on her door. "Dinner's ready, sweetheart," he called softly. Ariel didn't respond. She hadn't spoken since climbing into his car that afternoon. "Ariel," he pushed the door open slightly. "You need to eat something." She turned away from him, pulling the covers over her head. Eric sighed, his heart breaking for his daughter. "I'll leave it here," he said, placing a plate on her desk. "Try to have a few bites, okay?" When she didn't respond, he added, "I love you, Ari. We're going to fix this." "But how do you fix something like this?" he wondered as he closed her door. In another part of town, Maya Thompson sat at her sister Jasmine's kitchen table, watching her upload the video clip. "Are you sure we should do this?" Maya asked nervously. "Ariel is so private, she might not want everyone to see." Jasmine, a college sophomore and budding activist, looked up from her laptop. "This isn't just about Ariel, Maya. This is about every black girl who's been policed for her appearance. This is about power and who gets to exercise it. But Ariel? We'll thank you someday," Jasmine assured her. "Sometimes the only way to fight injustice is to expose it." She hit the upload button. Done. Now we wait. By morning, the short clip had been viewed over 10,000 times. Comments flooded in, most expressing outrage, some questioning what happened before the recording started, others demanding to see the full story. Maya texted Ariel repeatedly, but received no response. Jason Reed, the school's art teacher and Ariel's favorite instructor, caught wind of the incident during his morning prep period. Known for his colorful bow ties and genuine connection with students, Mr. Reed immediately went to Principal Wexley's office. "Is it true?" he demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "Did Evelyn really shave Ariel Daniels' head?" Wexley's face remained impassive. "Jason, you know I can't discuss disciplinary matters involving other staff." "This isn't about staff," Mr. Reed pressed. "This is about a 12-year-old girl with a medical condition who was humiliated in our school, a school that's supposed to protect her." "We're handling it," Wexley said dismissively. "Handling it?" Mr. Reed's voice rose. "By suspending Rohr for one day? That's not handling it, Thomas. That's sweeping it under the rug." Wexley's expression hardened. "Be careful, Jason. Your contract renewal is coming up. I'd hate to see your passion interfere with your professional judgment." "Are you threatening me?" Mr. Reed asked incredulously. "I'm reminding you of your place," Wexley replied coldly. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a district call in 5 minutes. That afternoon, Eric found an unmarked envelope that had been slipped under his front door. Inside was a handwritten note. Check the nurse's files, they know what happened. A friend. Eric's hands shook as he read the message again. Someone on the inside was reaching out. Someone who knew the truth. That night, Ariel finally fell into an exhausted sleep after hours of silent tears. But her rest wasn't peaceful. In her dreams, she stood on the school stage during assembly. One by one, her braids began falling, drifting to the floor like autumn leaves. The entire student body pointed and laughed, their faces distorting into grotesque masks of cruelty. In the dream, she tried to run, but her feet were rooted to the stage. Ms. Rohr appeared with oversized clippers, smiling as she approached. Ariel woke with a scream, her body drenched in sweat. Eric rushed into her room, gathering her into his arms as she sobbed against his chest. The first sound she'd made in nearly 24 hours. "It's okay, baby," he whispered, rocking her gently. "Daddy's here. You're safe." But they both knew it wasn't true. How could she be safe when she'd have to face those same hallways, those same stairs, the next morning? Eric called the school district board demanding an emergency meeting. The secretary put him on hold for 17 minutes before returning with a response. The board will review the incident at their next schedule. The meeting, in 3 weeks, she informed him, her voice professionally detached. 3 weeks? Eric's grip tightened on the phone. "My daughter was assaulted yesterday." "Sir, we understand your frustration, but proper protocols must be followed. The incident report has been filed, and the teacher has been disciplined. If you'd like to file a formal grievance, I can email you the form." Eric hung up, fuming. They were stalling, hoping the outrage would die down, hoping he would give up. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Online, the video continued to gain traction. Local news outlets picked up the story, though their coverage was frustratingly vague. Incident at local middle school sparks controversy. Comment sections filled with conflicting opinions. "That poor girl, that teacher should be fired immediately." "We don't know the whole story. Maybe the kid was being disruptive." "Why are people making this about race? It's about following school rules." "Black girls' bodies are always policed. This is just another example." The discourse raged, but for the Daniels family, this wasn't some abstract debate. This was their life, shattered in a single afternoon by a teacher's cruelty. Far away, at a military outpost, Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Daniels finally received Eric's encrypted video message. Her stoic composure, the same that had earned her respect among her subordinates, cracked as she watched the short clip of her daughter being marched down the hallway, fear etched across her face. The message attached was brief. "Ariel needs you. They shaved her head, all of it. She hasn't spoken in 2 days. I'm trying, but I don't know what to do." Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. 20 years of military training had prepared her for many things, but not this. Not an attack on her child, on her most vulnerable spot. Within minutes, she was in her commanding officer's quarters, requesting emergency family leave. Within hours, she was on a transport plane headed home, her face a mask of controlled fury, her mind racing with questions, scenarios, and plans. Someone had touched her daughter. Someone had violated her child's dignity. Someone had exploited their power to humiliate a 12-year-old girl, and that someone would pay. As the plane soared across continents, Naomi made a silent promise to her daughter. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Lieutenant Colonel Naomi Daniels pulled into the school's visitor space. She hadn't been home long enough to change out of her uniform, nor did she want to. 20 hours of travel had left her exhausted, but adrenaline coursed through her veins, keeping fatigue at bay. "Remember what we talked about?" Eric said from the passenger seat, his voice tight with concern. "These people aren't worth your career." Naomi checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting her cap with precision. Her eyes, usually warm brown, had hardened into something resolute and unyielding. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she replied, her voice measured. The calm in her tone was more frightening than any anger. "This isn't about my career. This is about our daughter." She'd spent the flight home reviewing her approach. As a lieutenant colonel who'd commanded hundreds of soldiers in high-pressure situations, Naomi knew that emotional outbursts rarely achieved objectives. Strategy, control, these were her weapons now. The school hallway fell silent as Naomi entered, her boots striking the tile floor with rhythmic purpose. Students pressed themselves against lockers, conversations dying mid-sentence. Teachers emerged from classrooms, curious about the sudden hush, only to step back when they saw her approaching. The military uniform commanded respect. Naomi's expression demanded answers. A young teacher started to approach her, then thought better of it. A janitor nodded slightly as she passed, a gesture of subtle solidarity. Naomi didn't break stride, moving with the confident bearing of someone who knew exactly where she was going. The teacher's lounge door stood halfway open. Inside, several faculty members were gathered around a coffee pot, including a thin woman with graying blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Ms. Rohr. Naomi pushed the door fully open. The conversation inside died instantly. Ms. Rohr turned, coffee cup halfway to her lips. Recognition flashed across her face, followed immediately by something Naomi recognized from her years in combat. Fear. Lieutenant Colonel Daniels, Ms. Rohr stammered, her cup trembling slightly. I didn't realize you were back from deployment. Clearly, Naomi replied, her voice arctic. She remained in the doorway, her presence filling the small room. I understand you've met my daughter. Rather intimately, in fact. The other teachers exchanged uncomfortable glances. One by one, they found excuses to leave, squeezing past Naomi with averted eyes until only Ms. Rohr remained. I was simply enforcing school policy, Ms. Rohr said, attempting to regain her composure. Perhaps if you'd been more present in your daughter's life. Don't, Naomi cut her off. Don't pretend this is about dress codes or my deployment. We both know better. The air between them crackled with tension, laden with an unspoken history. I don't know what you're implying, Ms. Rohr replied, but her voice had lost its conviction. 8 years ago, Naomi said quietly. Fort Benning, does that refresh your memory, Private Rohr? Or did you think I wouldn't recognize you? Ms. Rohr's face drained of color. You were in my training unit, Naomi continued. Discharged after multiple infractions and failing the basic qualifications 3 times. That was different, Ms. Rohr whispered. You singled me out. You had it in for me from day one. Because you couldn't follow simple orders, Naomi replied. And because you filed false reports about your black colleagues. Sound familiar? Ms. Rohr set her cup down with shaking hands. You can't prove anything. Not then. Not now. Naomi stepped closer. I don't need to prove it. I lived it. And now so has my daughter. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. This isn't over, Evelyn. Not by a long shot. She turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you ever come near my daughter again, you'll learn exactly why my unit called me the Hammer. As Naomi strode toward the principal's office, memories surfaced from her military past. Evelyn Rohr had been a problem from the first day of training, constantly undermining her black peers, claiming they received preferential treatment, filing complaints when she was corrected. After being discharged, she'd threatened to make them all pay someday. And now, here she was, wielding power over children instead of adults. The realization made Naomi's blood boil, but she kept her expression neutral as she approached Principal Wexley's office. His secretary attempted to stop her. Do you have an appointment? Naomi didn't break stride. He'll see me. She opened Wexley's door without knocking. The principal looked up from his computer, irritation flashing across his face before recognition set in. Mrs. Daniels, he said quickly, standing. We weren't expecting... Lieutenant Colonel Daniels, she corrected him. And you should have been expecting me the moment your teacher assaulted my daughter. Wexley gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, Mr. Wexley. Naomi remained standing. I'm methodical. There's a difference. She placed a military folder on his desk. The label, read, Incident Report. Daniels, A. Assault and battery. Educational negligence. Civil rights violation. What's this? Wexley asked, not touching the folder. This, Naomi said coldly, is what handling a situation looks like. My team has already compiled witness statements, medical documentation of Ariel's condition, and copies of all the permission forms we filed with your office last year. Wexley's confident demeanor faltered. Now let's not get ahead of ourselves. Ms. Rohr has been disciplined. A one-day suspension is not discipline, Naomi interrupted. It's a vacation. She tapped the folder. Inside, you'll also find evidence that Ms. Rohr has a history of racially motivated incidents. This isn't her first time targeting a black child, though it may be her most brazen. Wexley's face darkened. These are serious allegations. They're documented facts, Naomi corrected. And they'll be submitted to the district board, the state education department, and if necessary, the media. You're threatening the reputation of this entire school over one incident? Wexley asked, his tone incredulous. You threatened my daughter's dignity, her mental health, and her right to education free from discrimination, Naomi replied evenly. I'd say we're still not quite even. Later that afternoon, Ms. Rohr sat in a small office at the local news station, adjusting her collar nervously as a producer clipped a microphone to her blouse. "We'll be live in 3 minutes," the producer said. "Just tell your side of the story, like we discussed." Ms. Rohr nodded, practicing her most sympathetic expression in the monitor. When the red light came on, she transformed, her face a mask of wounded professionalism. "Thank you for having me," she said to the anchor. "It's important that people hear the truth." "And what is the truth, Miss Rohr?" the anchor asked. "I was simply doing my job," she replied, her voice quavering slightly for effect. The school had implemented a strict dress code policy, and as teachers were expected to enforce it. This student had been warned multiple times about her hair. "The student's family claims she has a medical condition," the anchor noted. "There was nothing in her file about hair exemptions," Ms. Rohr countered. "And frankly, I think this is being blown out of proportion because her mother is in the military. She's trying to play hero by threatening the school, but where was she when her daughter needed guidance on following simple rules?" The anchor's eyebrows rose at the personal attack, but before she could follow up, Miss Rohr continued. "I've dedicated my life to teaching, 20 years in the classroom, and now my reputation is being destroyed because one parent doesn't think the rules apply to her child." Across town, Eric Daniels waited until nightfall to return to the school. The anonymous note about the nurse's files had been eating at him all day. Who had sent it, and what would he find? The janitor who'd nodded at Naomi earlier was waiting by the side entrance, keys in hand. "Frank Williams," he introduced himself, voice low. "My daughter had Miss Rohr 3 years ago. Trust me, I know what that woman is capable of." "Thank you for this," Eric said, shaking the man's hand. "I don't want to get you in trouble." Frank shrugged. "Some things matter more than a job. The nurse's office is down the hall, third door on the left. The files are in the cabinet marked Medical Alerts." Eric moved quickly through the darkened hallways, the beam of his flashlight bobbing ahead of him. The nurse's office was unlocked, as Frank had promised. He headed straight for the file cabinet. It took him 15 minutes of searching before he found it. A complaint form Ariel had submitted 2 weeks before the incident. In it, she described how Ms. Rohr had made repeated comments about her hair, calling it distracting and unprofessional. The form was signed and dated, but there was no indication it had ever been processed. Scrawled across the bottom in red ink were the words, "No action required." Eric photographed the document with his phone, his hands shaking with anger. They'd known, they'd had warning, and they'd done nothing. While Eric gathered evidence, Naomi sat at her home office desk, methodically filing formal complaints with every relevant authority. The State Board of Education, the Office for Civil Rights, the American Civil Liberties Union, the National Association of School Principals. Each complaint was meticulously documented, her military precision evident in every detail. When she finished, it was past midnight. She checked on Ariel, who had finally fallen asleep clutching her sketchbook, then rejoined Eric in the kitchen. "Find anything?" she asked as he showed her the photos from the nurse's office. "They knew, Naomi," Eric said, his voice breaking with barely contained rage. "Our baby tried to tell them, and they ignored her." Naomi studied the document, her expression hardening. "Principal Wexley's signature is on this form. He personally declined to investigate." She looked up at Eric. "They're going to regret that decision." The next morning, Principal Wexley called Mr. Reed into his office. The art teacher entered wearily, noting the presence of the district's lawyer. "Jason, effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave," Wexley announced without preamble. "What?" Mr. Reed stared in disbelief. "On what grounds?" "Disrupting the educational environment," Wexley replied. "Several parents have complained that you've been discussing the Daniels situation in class." "That's not true," Mr. Reed protested. "Students have questions. I've simply reminded them to be kind to their classmates during a difficult time." "Your contract specifies that teachers will not introduce controversial topics in the classroom," the lawyer interjected. "Your leave is paid, but we expect you to turn in your keys and clear out your desk by noon." Mr. Reed stood slowly, anger radiating from him. "You know what happened to that child was wrong. Everyone in this building knows it. And this is how you respond? By silencing anyone who speaks up? "That will be all, Mr. Reed," Wexley said dismissively. As news of Mr. Reed's forced leave spread through the school, Naomi prepared for her most public move yet. Dressed in her full uniform, medals gleaming under the studio lights, she sat across from a national morning news anchor. "Lieutenant Colonel Daniels, thank you for joining us," the anchor began. "Can you tell us what happened to your daughter?" Naomi looked directly into the camera, her voice steady. My daughter Ariel has a medical condition called alopecia that causes hair loss. She wears extensions to protect her scalp and her privacy. Last week, a teacher at her school forcibly shaved her head, claiming it violated the dress code. The school has stated this was a miscommunication, the anchor noted. There was no miscommunication, Naomi replied firmly. There was deliberate cruelty and institutional cover-up. We had filed all the proper medical exemption forms. My daughter had submitted a complaint about this teacher's targeting behavior 2 weeks prior. The school ignored every warning sign. What do you hope will come from sharing your story? Naomi leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Accountability, justice for my daughter, and change, so no child ever experiences this kind of violation again. She paused, choosing her next words. Carefully. I've served this country for 20 years, protecting American values like dignity and equality. If the system won't protect my daughter, I will dismantle it myself and rebuild it better. The interview ended, but Naomi's words echoed across social media, igniting a firestorm that would soon engulf the entire school district. By nightfall, Naomi's interview had been viewed over 2 million times. Clips circulated on every social media platform, her final statement becoming a rallying cry for parents across the country. If the system won't protect my daughter, I will dismantle it myself. The family's phone rang constantly, news outlets requesting interviews, parents sharing similar stories, civil rights organizations offering support. Eric fielded the calls carefully, documenting each one while Naomi focused on their legal strategy. But most importantly, they focused on Ariel. The girl remained withdrawn, speaking little and eating less. Her once vibrant sketches had turned dark and chaotic, pages filled with harsh lines and shadowy figures. Still, she clung to her art supplies like a lifeline, spending hours hunched over her sketchbook in silent concentration. By morning, a small group of protesters had gathered outside Lakeside Middle School, their numbers growing with each passing hour. Parents, former students, and community members held signs reading, "Justice for Ariel" and "Protect our children." Among them was Maya, accompanied by her mother and sister. When reporters approached asking for interviews, Maya politely declined. "I'm just here for my friend," she told them. But her sister Jasmine was more vocal. "This isn't an isolated incident," Jasmine told a local reporter. "Miss Rohr has been targeting students of color for years. Ask any alumni." Her words sparked a flood of social media posts from former students, each sharing their own experiences with the teacher. "She made me wash my face in front of the class because my makeup was too ethnic. She said my natural hair was unprofessional and would limit my career options. She told me my name was too difficult and called me Amy all year instead of Amara." The stories mounted, creating a damning pattern that could no longer be dismissed as misunderstanding or miscommunication. Inside the school, tension filled the hallways. Students whispered about Ariel, about Miss Rohr, about the protesters outside. Teachers struggled to maintain focus, aware that every word could become part of the growing controversy. Late that evening, Naomi received an unexpected email from someone named Alex Baker, identified as the school's IT technician. "Mrs. Daniels," it read, "I've been following what happened to your daughter. There's something you should know. The full security video from the nurse's office exists, or at least it did. Principal Wexley ordered me to delete it from our servers the morning after the incident. I told him it was gone, but I might be able to recover it from our backup system. If you're interested, we can meet somewhere off school grounds." Naomi forwarded the email to their lawyer before responding with a meeting location. This could be exactly the evidence they needed, unedited footage showing exactly what had happened to Ariel. But Alex never showed up. 2 days passed with no word. Naomi tried calling the number he'd provided, but it went straight to voicemail. She was considering filing a missing person report when her phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Tell your hacker to stop digging or we'll bury him." A chill ran down her spine. She immediately forwarded the message to her military contacts in cybercrime, then called Eric. "They're threatening Alex," she said without preamble. "Whoever they are." "The school administration wouldn't go that far," Eric replied, uncertainty in his voice. "Maybe not Wexley," Naomi agreed, "but someone's pulling strings here. This is bigger than one teacher or one principal." While Naomi worked to uncover the truth and locate Alex, Ariel continued her silent recovery at home. She hadn't returned to school, couldn't face those hallways, those stairs. But she'd begun painting again. The first few canvases were dark, almost abstract swirls of black and gray with jagged red lines cutting through. But on the fourth day, something changed. She began a new painting, a barren tree, its branches stretching across the canvas like beseeching arms. Most of the leaves had fallen, scattered around the trunk in shades of brown and gold. But in the corner, almost hidden, a tiny green sprout pushed through the soil. When Naomi saw it, she stood in the doorway of Ariel's room, tears silently streaming down her face. "It's beautiful, baby," she whispered. Ariel didn't respond verbally, but she offered her mother the first genuine eye contact since the incident. A brief, meaningful glance that said more than words could. As the Daniels family focused on healing, the media landscape erupted into predictable battle lines. Conservative outlets framed the story as overblown. Military mom uses Pentagon connections to target teacher. School discipline or political correctness. The Lakeside Middle School controversy. Lieutenant Colonel overreaches. Should military officers influence civilian education? In response, Naomi called a press conference on the front lawn of their home. Dressed in civilian clothes, a deliberate choice, she stood before a bank of microphones, her posture military straight despite her casual attire. "I've heard the accusations that I'm using my military position to intimidate the school," she began, her voice calm and measured. "Let me be clear, I am not here as Lieutenant Colonel Daniels, I am here as Ariel's mother." She methodically listed the evidence they'd gathered, the medical exemption forms, Ariel's ignored complaint, witness statements, the school's contradictory public statements. "These are not military tactics," she continued. "This is what any parent would do to protect their child. The difference is, my training has taught me to be thorough and strategic. If that makes certain people uncomfortable, perhaps they should examine why." She ended by addressing the families watching. "If your child has experienced similar treatment, don't stay silent. Contact us. There is power in our collective voice." The press conference was a masterclass in controlled messaging. No outbursts, no accusations without evidence. Just a mother fighting for her daughter with every tool at her disposal. The following day, Superintendent Richard Palmer called his own press conference at the district headquarters. Flanked by the school board president and two stern-looking attorneys, he announced the formation of a special reform task force to review dress code policies and disciplinary procedures. "We take these allegations seriously," Palmer stated, not once mentioning Ariel by name. "While we conduct a thorough investigation, Ms. Rohr will remain on paid administrative leave." He then introduced a series of immediate reforms, including sensitivity training for all staff and a review of all dress code violations from the past 3 years. When reporters asked about the specific allegations of physical assault and the shaving incident, Palmer deflected. "We cannot comment on ongoing investigations or individual student matters due to privacy laws." Watching from home, Naomi scoffed. "Optics, not justice," she muttered to Eric. "They're hoping this task force buys them enough time for public interest to die down." "Maybe it's time to consider other options," Eric suggested hesitantly. "Private. The school, maybe. Somewhere Ariel can get a fresh start." Naomi turned to him, genuine surprise on her face. "You want to run?" "I want our daughter back," Eric replied, his voice cracking. "The girl who used to laugh, who used to talk, who didn't flinch every time someone walks past her room." "And what about the next girl?" Naomi challenged. "The next child who crosses Rohr or Wexley? If we run now, how many more will suffer?" "That's not fair," Eric said, anger rising in his voice. "Our first responsibility is to Ariel, not to some hypothetical future victim." "They're not hypothetical," Naomi insisted. "They're real, and they're waiting to see if someone will finally stand up and say, 'Enough.'" Their argument was interrupted by a notification on Naomi's phone. Maya had sent a message. "Found something, coming over." 20 minutes later, Maya sat at the Daniels kitchen table, her phone connected to their laptop. On the screen was a screenshot of a group text message between Ms. Rohr and another teacher, dated the morning of the incident. "I don't know if it helps," Maya said nervously, "but my friend's older sister teaches at Lakeside. She was in this group chat with Ms. Rohr and some others. She got kicked out after Ms. Rohr found out we're friends, but she saved some of the messages first." Naomi and Eric leaned closer to read the exchange. Ms. Rohr: "That Daniels girl is testing my patience again, drawing in class instead of taking notes." Unknown teacher: "The quiet one with the braids? She's one of our top students." Ms. Rohr: "Don't be fooled. She's been giving me attitude for weeks." Unknown teacher: "Maybe just let it go? Her mom's deployed, dad's raising her alone." Ms. Rohr: "No, I'm about to teach this brat a lesson she'll never forget." The timestamp showed the message had been sent just 30 minutes before Ms. Rohr had confronted Ariel about her hair. "This is premeditation," Naomi whispered, her legal training kicking in. She planned this. Can we use it? Eric asked. In court? Absolutely, Naomi confirmed. Maya, your friend's sister may need to testify. Is she willing? Maya nodded. She feels really bad about what happened. She said she should have reported Ms. Rohr a long time ago. Later that night, after Maya had gone home and Eric had fallen asleep on the couch, exhausted from weeks of stress, Naomi checked on Ariel one last time. To her surprise, the girl was still awake, sitting up in bed with her sketchbook. Can't sleep? Naomi asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Ariel shook her head, still not speaking, but she turned her sketchbook toward her mother. On the page was a drawing of two figures standing together, one tall in a uniform, one smaller with a perfectly round, bald head. Both were smiling. Naomi felt her throat tighten with emotion. That's beautiful, sweetheart, she managed to say. Is that us? Ariel nodded, then did something that broke Naomi's heart wide open. She spoke. Just 5 words, barely above a whisper, but they changed everything. Don't let them win, Mom. Naomi gathered her daughter in her arms, holding her close as tears streamed down both their faces. I won't, baby, she promised fiercely. I won't. The law office of Grace Yamada occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. Its reception area was a study in understated elegance. Potted bamboo plants stood in the corners, and the walls featured black and white photographs of historic civil rights moments. Naomi sat beside Eric on a sleek leather sofa, her posture military straight despite her civilian clothes. Across from them, Grace reviewed the documents spread across her glass top. Ed coffee table, medical records, school policies, witness statements, and screenshots of Ms. Rohr's damning text messages. At 42, Grace was one of the most respected civil rights attorneys in the state. The daughter of Japanese-American internment camp survivors, she had dedicated her career to fighting institutional injustice. Her record of wins against school districts, police departments, and government agencies was legendary. You've done impressive work gathering evidence, Grace said, looking up from the papers. Most clients come to me with anger and little else. You've brought me a case. Military training, Naomi replied simply. Document everything. Grace nodded, then leaned forward. I want to be clear about what we're facing. School districts have deep pockets and deeper connections. They'll try to bury this under procedural delays and technical objections. Are you prepared for a long fight? We're prepared for whatever it takes, Eric answered firmly. Good. Grace gathered the papers into a neat stack. Because I'm not just filing a complaint. I'm filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit naming the school district, Principal Wexley, and Ms. Rohr personally as defendants. Claims will include assault, negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and civil rights violations. She paused. This will get ugly. They'll attack your character, your parenting, even your military service. Naomi's expression didn't change. They can try,